Hi, this is Dr. Helen Sue from Hello Mental Health. Super excited today to have the co-directors of the Yellow Chair Collective. They are experts in so many things about Asian American mental health, but especially I want folks to read. And I've introduced before their book, Where I Belong, which is specifically about identity and healing trauma for Asian Americans. But I have a few questions while they're with us I hope we'll get to, but if I could get you both to introduce yourselves real quick to start.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Sujin Lee, and I am the executive director at Yellow Chair Collective and the co-author of the new book, Where I Belong, Healing Trauma and Embracing Asian American Identity. We're really excited to talk about our work and just like kind of our findings with our own lives and the lives of others that we've been working with here with you, Dr. Helen, today.
Great. Thank you for having us. My name is Linda Yoon. I'm the founder and co-director of Yellow Chair Collective. And Suni forgot to mention, we are also co-founders of a nonprofit and Twine community, which also work with BIPOC, especially Asian American communities, to make mental health more accessible. And then also the co-author of Where I Belong.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. And I wore my yellow jacket today in homage. How did you actually come up with the name for Yellow Chair Collective, and what was your vision?
Funny story to me. um, there so initially Susan and I met working with Asian Americans, Asian refugees and immigrants, and bulk of our training has come from working with the population. And so because of our experience and our own personal stories, we always wanted to serve the Asian American community in our career. However, in terms of going into private practice at the time, right, we're talking about many years ago, not too many, but some years ago, that can you actually have a private practice with Asian Americans, because there was so much stigma around mental health therapy. There's a lot of hesitation about pursuing therapy that we've been heard is pretty much impossible, almost impossible to have a practice with Asian Americans. So when we initially started our practice, we did have some Asian clients who came to us because we were Asian American therapists, but we had a very mix of all backgrounds, ethnicities. So when we were starting Asian American, when we were starting the practice, I want to just name something very personal to me, and yellow is a personal color to me. I'll share later a little bit about my background, but I had a childhood that was pretty abusive, family violence I experienced, a lot of abuse that I didn't realize until later figuring this out, but I felt really dark in my childhood. And then I was always attracted to color yellow. And then it was because color of sun and moon. I grew up in South Korea, which yellow was not racialized color. So there's nothing to do with like me being Asian or color skin being yellow, which I do not think we're yellow people. um, so it was a color that just meant sun, moon, and also innocence, because a lot of preschool kids wore yellow uniforms growing up in Korea. Um, for me, that color yellow, the golden light, really felt like something I wanted in my life and be able to spread to the world. So I was obsessed with this color for most of my life. Like I remember in high school, my parents will open my closet and it was just yellow clothes. And they were really concerned, actually. I didn't know why I was so obsessed with the color until later I made sense out of it. But I just really sought out yellow. I think I really held on to it. It was a coping and it was comfort for me. And I always knew I wanted to do something with yellow someday. So when I started practice, it was more of like, hey, I want to spread this, yellow golden light to the world, and I want to, it stands for joy, hope, resilience. So yeah, that's how it came about. And I also learned later that yellow has been used in revolution in Philippines and
Mm.
a very celebratory color in South Asian cultures too. But we did not really intended to focus on Asian American mental health. And sometimes people ask, like, is this because you focus on Asian mental health? And no, not really. Some people think it's a reclaiming, maybe, if that
Mhm.
resonates with you. But yeah, it was just really personal color for me, personal comfort aspect of it. That was a really long explanation, but yeah.
Yes, but thank you. I mean, for sharing and so authentically. And yes, we could actually talk a lot about symbolism, like
Mhm.
colors and what they mean in different countries, like entirely, that's such a good example.
Right.
But yes, and how that impacts mood. And yes, if people are reclaiming a term too, then yeah, that can
Yeah,
resonate on
we're
multiple
all for
levels.
that. Yeah, we're all for that. If you land with that well, because people have told us, they've told us, I love the name Yellow Chair Collective. It feels empowering to reclaim like that even term or the
Mhm.
color yellow in the way that it's been so racialized in this country in particular. So we're like, if that lands for you, then that's great.
That's great. And the chair is a therapy chair.
Yes.
Oh yes, therapy. Yes,
Mhm.
therapy chair. So when I first started my private practice, my first chair, guess what color was? The yellow chair.
I
Not
love
all of our offices have yellow chair
uh-huh.
right now. And so some clients come in and they're a little disappointed. So I think we do have to go with the brand at this point and replace all our chairs yellow.
Right. It's a branding thing, you know. And I feel you. I have a yellow wall, you know. Um, okay, well, I wanted to get to, some of your work. Like, how did you actually choose and come up with the title of your book? And focus on belonging and identity. I mean, I completely agree with you, but I think in some of the therapeutic settings I've been at, people don't really understand, like, oh, well, what does identity or belonging have to do with like healing from trauma? And that is a really unique experience, I think, for Asian Americans.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Mhm.
When we were choosing our title for the book, we were going through a lot of different things, but the term belonging continued to show up again and again as we were conceptualizing, like, what are we really talking about here? What is the experience that we really wanted the audience and the reader to be taking away? And also just in our own personal lives, like, what is the theme that is underlying tone of what we've been struggling with all along? Whether that is through our like racial trauma or intergenerational trauma, all of the above. And that term belonging was something that became so important for us. And so we knew that we had to include that as part of the title of the book. Uh, Belonging is something that seems to be continuously coming up and again, like I said, in my own personal life. And I share in this book as well of my own personal journey of being an undocumented immigrant. And so for the longest time, I thought that was my own struggle because I was an undocumented immigrant,
Mhm.
right? Being undocumented means that I am reminded again and again, almost on a daily basis, that I don't belong here. I'm told that I don't belong here through a lot of like legal paperwork and all of these things that people are talking about. Like for example, in high school, when the homeroom teacher, our school was very about getting prepared, getting students prepared for college. And
Mhm.
so they had all of these like even like sample college applications that they were helping students through. And of course, one of the things that they were helping students fill out was, the scholarship forms and, FAFSA forms, things like that, to make sure that students are taken care of, which is really great school to do that. And the homeroom teacher would constantly have assigned us those kind of tasks. And for me, it was not applicable to me because I didn't have a lot of scholarships that I was able to apply to. I was not allowed to apply for FAFSA at the time that I was in high school. And so in those like really detailed ways, it was telling me that I don't belong here, right? This is something that was supposed to get applicable to everyone, and yet it's not for me, right? And so belonging is something that I've struggled with for a long time in my life. And when I became a therapist and I started seeing clients, especially from the Asian American background, I've noticed that that was also a theme in a lot of their lives. And that, in a way, gave me a reciprocal healing as well. That, wait, this is something I've struggled with, that I'm supporting other people struggle with too. And so we wanted to make sure that people know that that's a theme that is shared across all of our cultural identities.
I love that. Yeah, how sometimes when we are feeling unsafe
Mhm.
and that lack of belonging, and we think we're the only one, or it develops, and I've seen that too, it turns into shame and fear, but actually the validation that comes to realize that this is a very widespread human struggle. And you're right, especially for Asian Americans, for immigrants, for people without the right documentation, or who just may be very isolated where they live for so many reasons.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And the journey of this book is really unique to us than other books because of the way that we've set it up. We wanted to make sure that there was a lot of other people's personal journeys in there, right? As
Mhm.
I mentioned, my stories in here, then the stories in here as well. And each chapter has at least 2 to 3 stories of people's encounters of their upbringing, their cultural struggles and identity struggles. And we wanted to do that on purpose because we wanted to make sure that when people are reading the book, that even if they're not getting the educational portions of it, that they can read through other people's stories and that they know that they belong.
That they are not alone. Yes, and
Mhm,
that is timeless. Like storytelling is how we've learned in the global majority forever. So
mhm.
yes,
Yeah,
I love that about the book, definitely. I've had to explain to professors, or when I wrote my book too, that, stories are very culturally normative,
right.
and it needs to be stories, not like a chart or
Yeah,
just a
yeah,
chart and a bunch of data.
Yeah,
exactly.
definitely.
How we receive information.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Ah,
There was someone who gave us a review.
mm,
Thank you for the reviews. It's really helpful. But that how we didn't tell, in the book, we didn't tell or preach this is Asian American experience. We
mhm.
really try to show by sharing people's narratives, their own personal stories, that this is what their experience like, instead of us just really telling this is the experience, because we cannot represent all the diversity within Asian American community.
Right. Absolutely. That dozens of languages and generational things. But it's like here's our commonalities, and then each individual is still going to have their unique experience.
Mhm.
Which brings me to another question people often ask is like, how do you actually describe trauma um, briefly to folks who maybe they don't have a formal diagnosis or have never seen like a therapist, but they definitely suspect or realize that maybe their own experiences and or the intergenerational experiences of what their family has been through is impacting their health and well-being.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even just briefly, how you described it is exactly how we describe it,
Mhm.
actually, is that we don't have to particularly maybe utilize the word trauma, but we wanted to also redefine trauma for a lot of our folks in our community, because for the longest time, clinically, the way that trauma has been defined is through the lens of PTSD, right? The post-traumatic stress disorder. And the way that that looks at it is like you have to have had the encounter of like near-death experience or have witnessed it or heard it. And then you have all of these criteria where people are thinking, well, if I have trauma, I should be dreaming about certain things over and over again,
Mhm.
or that I should be avoiding a certain place or certain time or certain location over and over again, right? And these are kind of the way that even maybe media has portrayed what trauma looks like, and people have adapted that to be the only lens of what trauma is. But in fact, there's so many different wide ways that our bodies are experiencing trauma and hold on to trauma. And our internal experiences of who we are and how we belong in this world, if that doesn't feel reflective of our current daily experiences, that on its own can be traumatic too, right? That we're continuously hiding a part of ourselves. And when people hear that, they're like, wait a minute, wait, that can be traumatic?
Mhm.
Then yeah, I am living through that. And I
Mhm.
land with a lot of ways in which my body is responding to, and my thoughts are responding to the world in a way that feels a little bit difficult.
Mhm.
Yeah, in the book, we try to simplify it much as possible. Because for me, I had an aha moment that what I experienced was trauma. Like went through abuse, we experienced family violence. Even then, when my therapist first time told me that you have trauma, I was like, do I? Do I really have trauma? Has been my whole life. Um, I don't know the difference, right? And that's the same thing, a similar conversation that I have with some of my clients too.
Mhm.
And a simple, for me, I came up with, hey, like if there is something that you are getting stuck over and over,
Mhm.
it feels like it's not really integrated in your brain, you're not able to move on, whether it's behavior, thought patterns, then that could be a trauma. Like that could underneath of it could be trauma that's why you're not able to move on. Like it's not integrated in your brain, so it's keep getting stuck there. Like so, that's something that we try to explain very simple term within the book and also with our clients that if something stuck can't move on, it's worth looking into that your experiences may have been traumatic.
Mhm. I like that. It gets away from the jargon of needing, like it's complex PTSD or it's this syndrome.
Yeah,
It's like your body or in your mind has felt very dysregulated or unsafe or unstable, and that can get stuck.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah.
For some of us, maybe for generations. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, and what have you seen about the Asian American experience that I feel like sometimes we do also get stuck in even knowing what's normal or
Mm,
acceptable for ourselves? Like we get bogged down with saving face or trying to live up to a model minority myth instead of really understanding like our whole emotional lives and being whole, well-rounded people.
yeah, yeah. I feel like it's really sad to me personally because actually culturally, like if we look at it in the historical lens,
Hmm.
we've always had the concept of well-being as a holistic care, actually,
Yeah.
right? For a lot of Asian countries. And yet along the way, we've kind of lost that. And I think part of that is through, all of these different ways that we have migrated and lost some of our culture and beliefs along the way. But they for Asian Americans specifically, like coming into the US and trying to adapt to this Western culture, like we've abandoned a lot of ourselves and our culture and beliefs so that we can survive in this, hierarchy of white and black. And we're trying to exist in somewhere and trying to
Hmm.
get to this top of this hierarchy, right? Uh, well, with that said, I think our experiences of holistic care, I feel like there's a movement coming back for our generation, perhaps even the younger generation, of wanting to bring this sense of holistic care and wellness into the conversation of mental health again. And so I really appreciate that about where we are existing in our
Hmm.
space and time with the conversations of mental health in this movement, especially in the Asian community. Because every time we talk about it, like a lot of people are telling us, hey, I'm engaging in yoga more regularly, and I feel like something is different about my mental health. And that's a gateway for us to have a conversation about our mind and body and how it's connected, and even our spiritual care and how that's connected as well to our mental health. So that's been really incredible for me.
Hmm. Hmm. I don't know if you have some thoughts about that, Linda, but I think you're right. it's sort of like the Western research is just now publishing, like, wow, meditation changes your brain waves.
Yeah,
Singing improves your mood. Yoga
right.
helps you feel better. Like, well, a lot of us have known this for thousands of years.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
exactly. And
And
go ahead.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned about saving face too, I seeing that, the younger generation are saying, I'm kind of sick of not being myself, right? I
Mhm.
feel that dysregulation that you have mentioned when we talked about the experience of trauma, right? Like I'm feeling that over and over again within my own family household. And I feel like I'm not myself with my family when I'm out versus when I'm out with my friends. And I want to be able to feel a little bit more integrated. And so those things are, I think, a conversation that is happening. And how do we change then our behaviors? How do we change the way that we interact with ourselves and with our family members so that I can feel a little bit more safe? I can feel a little bit more of myself. Is things that we've been talking a lot about with our clients, which is amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just want to have share some thoughts systematically for longest time, even when we were in grad school and learning and going into the fields, there was definitely a hierarchy, right? There's a lot of emphasis, and I know still in academia, by its definition, there's a lot of emphasis on
Mhm.
evidence-based practice, right? That was spoken to me every day. Make sure it's evidence-based practice, right?
Yeah.
However, there wasn't a lot of research or even like interest or funding from those who were in power to really look into Eastern, methods of healing, right? And like I know my colleagues, my friends who were in PhD program want to do some kind of Eastern medicine, healing, mental health, like they will be told that it's too niche, there's not much interest, no grant, so for longest time that we just didn't have a way to become an evidence base even. and
Mhm.
and I have seen like we internalize it too. We're seeing it and then we're being told that the history of our Eastern medicine. Like for me, I grew up in Korea using a lot of herbal medicine, Chinese herbal medicine, acupuncture, and being told that those are not evidence-based, those are inferior, and almost feel like, oh, okay, for me to be accepted in the society, I have to abandon those practices that are dear to me, that been passed down generations to fit in, right? And I definitely have seen in the community really looking down on our own ancestral healing method because we've been so told, at least our generation, that those are not acceptable, those are not evidence-based. So it's really beautiful to see decolonization movement and
Mhm.
people reclaiming, and then because there are interests now more evidently that there are some fundings to actually do research and big and being acknowledged, it's little late, they're being acknowledged
Mhm.
and that it's being used as evidence-based practices as well.
Yeah. It's so true. Like it's actually like instead, and I was also trained in a model where it seemed like, oh, those are kind of, old-fashioned, and these
Mhm.
new evidence-based, research-based things are the best. And we're now at a place that the research is actually proving like,
Right.
oh, this works. And that if anything, I feel like sometimes Western psychology is appropriating.
Hmm.
Right? Like if you look at the principles of ACT, GBT, CBT type therapies, well, they're kind of the same things that, for example, Buddhists have been teaching, or meditation teachers in all kinds of countries have been teaching these principles. So
Right. Right.
maybe we're finally really understanding that richness.
Yeah. And then to be able to, like Linda said, I think reclaim that this
Mhm.
is of our culture, my upbringing is something that I think is also necessary for us to continue to do.
Mhm. And that is one of my final questions for today. You detail so many useful, practical, like grounding skills for mind and body, throughout the book. And would you maybe each share that? Like, is there a favorite go-to for you when you're like under a lot of stress?
I actually have a background in art, like fine arts.
Mhm.
And I love having something visual for me to feel settled. Um, and so drawing is something that is really important for me. And so for me to think through something that feels a little bit more stressful in the day, my wind down is just actually making little patterns maybe on like a notepad. And then throwing them away is also very useful for me in terms of like my thoughts being thrown away and being organized. And
Mhm.
so creating little patterns of art is something that I really truly enjoy as a mindfulness activity, and then throwing them away.
Mm. I love that. Getting it on the paper instead of ruminating up here.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are so many tools, and there are so many tools that did not make to the book too, right? I'm sure as you're writing the book, you have to cut
Mhm.
out things.
Mhm.
Um, but for me, I like the most simplest tools that most of us know, the square breathing.
Mhm.
Simple yet so effective. And every time I do it, or every time I lead my clients, or I do it with, a group, just that regulation that kind of calms down the nervous system. Things are a lot more clear. Um, Simple yet so effective. And that's what I love about it.
Mhm. I love both of those too because they are so applicable, right? We don't always have time to go to yoga class or
Right.
take a long walk, but we could do our doodles or drawings, or we can do the breathing in just that quick moment between maybe a stressful meeting and our next transition.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that we really wanted to also emphasize is that, nowadays, like mindfulness exercises or tools, they seem very daunting because they feel, even just that term feels like it's going to require so much out of me to
Mm.
put it into my schedule of busyness of the day. But really, like what it is supposed to be, is just that little break for your brain. And that could be as simple as just that 30 seconds of what Linda mentioned of breathing.
Mhm. It's the redirect.
Hmm.
When we're snowballing into panic or upset, just having that break. Yeah.
Small break.
Yeah, I really like that. And it's that idea of that learning that we have efficacy. We're not just sort of always going to be victim to things happening. It's sort of like, how do we slow this process down?
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
And be thoughtful about it. And thank you both for sharing also like even a glimpse of what you've experienced, because that's huge too. Um, in my county, we have a huge, we call our peer educators consumer champions in Alameda County, and really a
Mm,
lot of like nothing about us, without us. That I
mm,
think people with lived wisdom really have that place that we're all part of the community too. We're not just sort of these practitioners
right.
serving people, right? We've all
Yeah.
been in community mental health. We've all been in the community. I think that's so valuable.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Yes. I mean, thank you both so much for taking time out of your very busy workloads. And can you talk just a little bit to the end about how could someone find out more about Yellow Chair Collective and about your book or any book events?
Yeah, so um, we have our Yellow Chair Collective website and Instagram at Yellow Chair Collective or yellowchaircollective.com, where you will find a lot of information. There's a lot of resources, a blog as well, about Asian and Asian American mental health and all the topics we've discussed, and so much more. So there's a lot of resources on our website. Our book, Where I Belong, you can go to our website, whereibelongthebook.com. And that's where you'll be able to also find all the different places that you can make the purchase, or on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and a lot of the bookstores, local bookstores. You hopefully be able to find it and order it with them too. Uh, we do have a tour coming up, and we're going to be in Seattle this very weekend, actually. I don't
Wow.
know when this is going to get released, but
Hope you record some more of your events too. Yeah.
and then in May, it looks like we're going to be in Washington, D.C., actually. So all of those updates of where we're going to be in person for the book tour, you can find at whereibelongthebook.com. And if you follow us at Yellow Chair Collective.
Oh, That sounds so exciting. Thank you so much for your work. And I've been recommending the book everywhere. And thank you for taking the time out to just share some of your thoughts today.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
thank you
much for having us.
thank you so much for having us.